there's a lot of focus on what divides us, but the real opportunity here is what unites us. We're having a contest here with this shutdown where our side is very concerned about what happens to these tax credits. Your side is very concerned about using a shutdown as a tactic. I think we both have pretty valid arguments. And one of the reasons I think there's merit in our position is the reality that once the December 31st deadline arrives, people literally are going to lose health care. So what unites us? Both sides really do want to have all of government paid, and we want to be reopened. And both sides, I believe, want to make certain that the people we represent continue to have access to health care, that the health care they had in 2025, they're going to have in 2026. That won't happen unless we resolve this. And given the time crunch, the only way, as a practical matter, we can do something that helps the people you represent and helps the people I represent is extend what we have for another year. So it's not an overreach on the part of, say, folks who want a single-payer health care system. It's not overreach or diminishing any concerns folks on the Republican side, and by the way, on our side, have about the cost of health care. We are in a practical crunch where unless this United States Senate acts, the people we represent are going to lose health care. That's the fact. That's just the fact. It's the way it is. And we've talked about how those premium increases are going to spike. So what do we do in this situation where Leader Thune, who we trust, who we respect, is taking a position that we won't have discussions until we reopen government? Why do we object to that or have cautions about that? We trust Leader Thune. We trust our Republican colleagues. But what happens after it goes out of the Senate? We have no guarantee whatsoever it'll be taken up in the House at all. So the question that a farmer in Vermont would ask me at the end of any agreement is, Peter, what does this mean? Will I get my health care in 2026? And unless we have it where it's going to get a vote with some support from our colleagues in the House, the answer is I don't know, but I hope so. So we find ourselves with January 1st here, and that farmer, that small business person, not having health care. And again, this is the lament I have. What we're trying to do here, the folks who are going to benefit or not suffer are Republicans who voted for Trump and Democrats who voted for Harris and independents who didn't like either candidate at all. So we have an opportunity. And actually, we're the only people in the United States of America who have an opportunity. The only people, it's us, who've been entrusted by the people who we represent with their vote to solve this problem. And what I think is being proposed has a quality that's rare around here. It's restraint. We're not trying to overreach. We're just trying to say, maintain the status quo so that the folks in America who are getting their health care with the help of some tax credits will continue to have that health care in 2026 as they have it in 2025. So I hope we can come together for this temporary fix. And by the way, I just want to say the cost of health care is exploding. And we have an obligation, if we want to maintain access to health care, to address that. It's not a solution to deal with the health care crisis by taking people off of health care. They still get sick. So when our leader says that we want this bipartisan committee to address the cost of health care, we are sincere about that, because the biggest threat to the continued access to health care is the exploding cost of health care. I yield to my colleague from Wisconsin.
Madam President.
Senator from Wisconsin.
I rise today to echo, to underscore, to emphasize what my colleagues have just presented. This is our path forward. This is how we reopen the government and lower health care costs for millions of Americans. This is what compromise looks like. Look, if I had my way, we would be making these enhanced premium tax credits for working families permanent. But I understand that we can't get everything that we want. That's how compromise works. And that is what our constituents expect that we do when we come here. I know that giving relief for the 275,000 Wisconsinites who are shopping online at healthcare.gov for healthcare as we speak, I know that this relief is urgent, just like it's urgent that we reopen our government. I've had so many conversations with my Republican colleagues here in the Senate. I know that so many of them have expressed privately that they are supportive of a one-year extension of Affordable Care Act tax credits. You know, they're hearing from their constituents who will no longer be able to afford their health care also, just like we are. So I hope my Republican colleagues can join us in voting to pass this proposal so that we can finally put this shutdown behind us and allow 22 million Americans to rest easier, knowing that their health care costs are not going to double, triple, or even worse. That I yield to the Senate.
Madam President.
Senator from Arizona.
Madam President, for more than a month, I've been here in D.C. fighting to keep health care costs from spiking for my constituents. And for more than a month, I've been hearing from people I represent about what their health care costs now and what it will cost if these tax credits are allowed to expire. People like Leslie from Buckeye, who's a diabetic and whose premium is about to go from $600 a month to $1,000 per month. And people like Jessica from Yuma, her and her husband currently pay $560 per month for them and their 3 kids. That's going to go to $3,100 per month if these tax credits are not extended. And for more than a month, I've been waiting for the President or Republican leadership in the Senate to sit down with us and try to figure this out, or even show that they care about the millions of Americans in our states who are in the same boat, people like Leslie and Jessica. Now, that hasn't happened. The President, as far as I can tell, has spent about 1 hour in the Oval Office with congressional leadership on this issue. 1 hour in 37 days. He has spent more time talking about his ballroom and on 2 overseas trips and at a costume party at Mar-a-Lago and, of course, on the golf course. The House of Representatives, they've been on a 7-week paid vacation. They are not even pretending to care about these rising health care costs. And the Senate, not much better. Week after week, the leadership of the Senate breaks for a long weekend, all while Americans are suffering. And they're suffering even more because Donald Trump is using them as pawns in this fight. He's still trying to illegally withhold SNAP benefits from hungry Americans, including children, to use as leverage. Donald Trump's official position on the government shutdown is that he will let hardworking Americans go hungry until we give in to his demands to let health care premiums go up dramatically for millions of Americans. Now, is that the position of my Republican colleagues? I keep hearing from many of you that you want to do something about this, but you say you can't negotiate. Not now. So let's just lay it out here. We need to extend government funding to reopen the government. But we also need to extend these tax credits so millions of Americans can actually afford their health care. So let's do both. No gimmicks, no changes. Let's reopen the government. But we can do that knowing that Jessica and Leslie and a whole bunch of other people that we represent can take their kid to a doctor and fill their prescriptions for another year. There is no reason why we can't agree on this. If you want to reopen the government and you want to help keep health insurance premiums from spiking, then let's do it. But if you say no, if you say you can't vote for something like this, well, let's just be honest about it. Tell the Jessicas and Leslies in your state that they're not going to be able to afford their health care anymore. Tell them that Donald Trump thinks that they should go to a food bank for groceries so they can have something to eat. Now, Madam President, I also think we need to be perfectly clear about why we are here and how we got here. All of this we have discussed over the last month is because Donald Trump and Republicans in the House and Senate wanted to give a big, giant tax cut to the wealthiest Americans, a $4 trillion giveaway. And again, Madam President, we want a deal. We can choose to fix this so Jessica and Leslie and millions of others can afford to have basic health care. I yield the floor.
Senator from Delaware.
Madam President, I actually have written notes here. I came prepared to talk about the importance of the ACA tax credits. And as I sat here, I prayed, what do I even say in this moment? There's a scripture that says, choose ye this day. Today, we have an opportunity to make a choice. We have an opportunity to do something that is so plain and so simple. There's a book in the Bible called the book of Habakkuk. A lot of people don't even know it. It's like three chapters. And in it, it says, we always hear how long, not long. No, in it, it says long. It says pain. It says corruption. It says suffering. But what it does say is make a plan and make it plain. So what we come today to say is we have something that is plain and simple and will lift up America. And that is the opportunity to both open the government and restore people's health care. It's that plain, it's that simple. We're not saying you're better than us and we're better than you. We're saying link them together on behalf of the American people. It's a sad day in America when people have to choose between their health care and housing, or their health care and food. We're not in a pandemic. There are no wars on our shores. This should not be a hard time for us. We are not without resources in this country. And so today, as many people are being priced out of the American dream, I ask my colleagues, come to the table, work with us. I'm so proud to be one of the freshman class, one of the most diverse classes in the history of this chamber, with Alyssa Slotkin, with Ruben Gallego, with Adam Schiff, with Andy Kim, and my sister Senator Angela Alsobrooks. 5 of the 6 of us came from the House of Representatives. And so for us, it's almost like we have a foot in both worlds. And for us, this proposal is an opportunity to not only pass something here, but to pass something in the House that becomes a law. and that gets something for the American people. We also have relationships and have been in conversations with our former House Republican colleagues who also want to get something done. And so today, again, off script, but in my heart, we are standing here for the American people saying, we can end this today. And we are saying to the President of the United States, I hope you can hear us. We are saying to the President of the United States, you said it yourself after Tuesday's election, this is hurting Republicans. Well, you know what? It's also hurting all of America. And so we hope that you will engage in something that is simple and clear. Open the government and make sure we restore people's tax credits together. Again, how long? Long if we choose to be. But we have a choice in this moment. And so we hope that you will come to the table. Let's make a deal. I yield back.
Mr. President.
Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I thank the senator from Delaware, wise words, and I thank Senator Schumer, all our colleagues that have gathered here today. We truly come in good faith. I thank our Republican colleague who is listening to us right now and for the good work that he has done in trying to bring people together. And we know there's a number of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle who've been working diligently with Democrats to try to resolve this. And we come in good faith because we know this isn't a blue state or a red state problem, it's everyone's problem. When we look at the people who are on these Affordable Care Act plans, they tend not to work at big corporations. If they did, they'd have health care. They do have health care. They tend not to work at government, local, state, federal. They tend to have health care. They work at small businesses. They are entrepreneurs, like the woman that I spent time with last weekend in Eagan, Minnesota, who has one employee, and she's so proud of her business. She's been doing better. And he had cancer a few years ago, and he got through it. He's married, has kids, and that plan, she pays for 75% of the premiums, her only employee, and he pays for 25% of the premiums. And she just looked at what would happen, and she thought, I don't know if I can keep them on. They're going to double. Those are the people we're talking about. Farmers and ranchers, 27% of the farmers in our country are on this kind of plan. So these are people that are just on the margin so much because they've decided to go out on their own and be entrepreneurs. Or when I talk to my rural hospitals, they tell me how the people who are on these plans, if they can't afford a doubling or tripling of the premiums, which is what we're seeing right now with the numbers that came out on the marketplace, if it's doubled or tripled, they'll just drop their plans because they've still got to get groceries, they still got to pay the mortgage, so then they're going to drop their plans, and then the rural hospitals, who are already just hanging on, aren't going to be able to make it. So it's this all of a mix of things that I think would defy people's predictions of who's depending on these plans, and I think we're starting to hear from them now. So we have this opportunity. This is really, I'd say, a practical plan. It looks at what we need to do to open the government again. It looks at the work that's been done by our great leaders in appropriations. And it says, okay, what can we do about health care right now? We disagreed with the bill that got passed this summer on our side, but what can we do right now? And what we can do right now is stop this doubling and tripling of these health care premiums. And it's not something that's going to help in the end of December or January. It's a now thing. They're making their decisions now. So that's why we came forward with a lot of people in our caucus, as you can imagine, having differing views and wanting more with good faith. But we figured this is a good idea so that we can, one, help these people in all our states, and then two, look at reforms. We are open for reforms, and then these reforms would have to be done before these tax credits expire at the end of next year. but it will get us through this, and most important, it'll get people through it, like Elizabeth of St. Peter, Minnesota, who told me, I have no idea how I'm going to come up with the extra $200 each month. This is what's happening. People who are terrified of what's going on. So we have this moment in time. We're ready to work through the weekend. We hope our colleagues are as well. So let's get to the table. I hope the president comes and meets with us. The amount of money we're talking about here is about the same as the money that went to Argentina. I'm not going to relitigate that, but it shows what we could do and why we could do it. So let's get it done. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I join all of my Democratic colleagues here today to offer this proposal on the health care issue that has been holding all of us here and all of the American public for weeks now. Because after Republicans refused to work with us to save the premium tax credits all this past year, what we hear Republican leaders saying now is they maybe, possibly, will talk about health care. It just has to be later. We are so far past that. Open enrollment is happening right now. Republicans have already pushed millions of Americans off that tax credit cliff. If we truly want to help these people, Republicans need to work with us as fast as possible to pass this clean one-year extension. This is not some pie in the sky request. As my previous speaker alluded to, if Republicans had no problems with Trump shoveling nearly twice as much money at Argentina, why would they oppose giving this kind of support to our own American families? Is there no time for working families? Are there no funds for health care? Mr. President, I cannot accept that. We cannot accept that. We can act, but we have to do it now. Every day that passes, this damage gets worse, and, by the way, harder to reverse. The best and quickest way to address the mega healthcare hike is this clean one-year extension of the enhanced premium tax credit written into the CR that we ultimately will vote on to reopen the government. Like my colleagues, I have heard so many heartbreaking stories from people in my state. They're not political. They don't care about Democrats or Republicans. But I will tell you, they are at a breaking point. Some of them have been on the verge of tears as they talk to me, explaining how they simply cannot afford to buy health care for next year. That weighs heavily on me and all of my colleagues. We carry their stories with us. Their words are on repeat in my mind every minute I walk through these halls. I am here today fighting with my heart and soul. I'm giving Republicans every opportunity in the world to do the right thing. I've been out here on the floor, I've spoken ad nauseum about how letting these tax credits expire will actually hurt people in Republican states the most. So we're here today to say our hand is outstretched. We are ready to go, a one-year clean extension, and we can reopen the government and save so many families misery in this country. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Senator from Colorado.
I speak today to echo the sentiments of my fellow members of the caucus. This is a moment where, at least in Colorado, we hear stories every day of people faced with the challenge of whether to pay their rent or to make sure they maintain their health care. People who have pre-existing medical conditions that are worried that if they go off their health care now, they might be pushed into a circumstance where they can only receive attention in emergency room situations, defeating the purpose of their treatments. By going forward and taking a one-year extension, nothing new, but just a one-year extension, we allow all those people in Colorado and across the country to sort through their health care issues, to re-equilibrate, and to make sure that they are not left out in the cold. And I think that's the The key here, we're looking at tens of millions of people that will either lose their health care or have dramatically significant increases in the cost of their premiums if we do nothing. So I hope that we can come together and move forward with this clean CR with the extension of the subsidized tax credit for the ACA. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Oregon.
all across our country, in every congressional district, in every corner of every state, families are suffering. They're taking a look at what it's going to cost to buy health care for this coming year. And they're going, wow, I won't be able to afford that. I guess I'll go without. And we know what happens when people go without health care. And this is clearly not something that is a blue issue or a red issue. It's an issue for every family, affordable, quality health care. And I know it's not just a concern held by Democratic senators, it's a concern held by Republican senators. So we have a common desire, Democrats and Republicans together, to address this concern. I think about some of the folks who have written in from my home state, and I know my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are getting the same letters and the same phone calls. Eric in Corvallis got a letter that his insurance premium is exploding from $183 to, get this, $1,588. Wow, that's, well, roughly a seven-fold increase. I heard from Leah in Eugene, whose monthly payment is going from $462 to $1,438. Threefold increase. And Stacy in Lincoln City seen an increase from $1,300 to about $3,200, almost a $2,000 increase. So those stories are everywhere in our country. And there is so much work we can do on health care together. The president has said, let's negotiate on those complex issues after the government is opened. And those complex issues, they may be things like the cost-sharing reduction program. They may be things like, how do we lower the cost of drugs so we don't pay more for drugs than the folks in Canada across the border to the north pay for their drugs, or the folks in England or Australia or Japan. We can work together on strategies to see where there's waste in the system. Or are there scams and scandals in the system? Let's shine the light on them and let's fix them after the government reopens. But let's just do this one piece, extend one particular tax provision that's in law now for this coming year. So there's immediate relief to folks who are getting on the internet at this very moment and going, oh my goodness, I can't afford that. The Erics, the Leahs, the Stacys that exist in every corner of every state. I've been hearing from small businesses, and they've been saying Main Street is Pain Street. Why? Because so many of the small businesses in my state, and I'm sure in every state, go to the ACA exchange in order to buy insurance. And so they're reeling from that impact. They're reeling from other economic fluctuations in the country. And they're saying, can't you figure this out? Can't you figure this out? So I've been hearing from colleagues on both sides of the aisle, we want to fix these tax credits, these enhanced tax credits for people to buy insurance. Well, let's do it. We can open the government today. We can do it today. Today we can address the issue my colleague from Wisconsin was speaking to just an hour or so ago. He was saying people who are working should get a paycheck. That will happen if we pass this today. He was saying folks who are furloughed should get a paycheck. We can do that by putting them back to work, by opening the government today. And then we can negotiate on those complex issues to make this system work a whole lot better, because all of us know that our system is overly complicated, overly bureaucratic, inefficient, and we know that there can be improvement. So let's work on those things together. The proposal that the leader has put forward, the minority leader has put forward, says let's form a special committee to work on those issues and find some proposals to take us to a better place. That's the type of partnership that we need to give encouragement to the American people, that we're willing to work together to solve the challenges that they see every day in their lives at their kitchen table. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator from California.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, colleagues, I rise in support of this proposal to extend the ACA tax credits, extend the existing law for another year, reopen the government, and give us time to negotiate the longer-term extension of the Affordable Care Act. This whole discussion, and frankly the whole debate we've been having over the last several weeks over the Affordable Care Act, brings me back to the immediate aftermath of the passage of that bill when I was doing sidewalk office hours inside the Glendale Galleria. I had my little coffee table set up there and had someone come up to my table and ask me how I voted on that bill, how I voted on Obamacare. And when I told him that I voted for it, he was indignant. And he said, "What could you possibly have liked? What could you possibly have liked about that bill?" And I said, well, actually, there were a lot of things I liked about it. I liked the fact that if you had a pre-existing condition, you could get health care. I remember another of my constituents saying that he was 65. He was a pre-existing condition. I liked the fact that if you had a kid who was 26 or under, you could keep them on your insurance policy if they didn't have one. And then I said, and I like the fact that tens of millions of people that can't otherwise afford health care are going to be able to get health care. And he looked at me and said something that I never imagined I would hear. He said, and you really think that's such a good idea? That is, that millions of people can't afford health care would be able to get it. And I said, well, yes, I do, don't you? And he said, no, I don't. If they can't afford it, they shouldn't have it. And I recognized the moment he said it that he was speaking for millions of people. I'd had one of those huge town halls with 3,000 people, and no one would say that even at those screaming town halls. But his view was if they can't afford it, they shouldn't have it. And I think that view is really at the center of this debate. In the wealthiest country in the world, does the government have any responsibility to make sure that health care is accessible to people? I think we do. Now, who are these millions of people that are going to lose their health care if we don't extend the ACA tax credits? Well, let me just share the stories of two of them and my constituents who wrote to me. The first one said, my bronze HMO high deductible plan is $752 per month, and using most but not all of the tax credit, my monthly premium is $200 per month. That's using $552 worth of credits. I'm single, I'm currently single and retired, so my income is well within the limits to qualify for the credits, but if all the credits go away for 2026, this will wipe me out. And I will likely go without insurance, even though I know that's not a good idea. And here's the story of a second constituent. Anyone else gotten their health plans rates for 2026? I did today, and I will have to cancel mine. With chronic conditions requiring daily prescriptions, weekly doctor visits, current quarterly labs, and biannual mammograms, my share of cost will go up well over $1,000 per month. And as a senior on a fixed and low income, I could not possibly come up with $1,000 a month. Sadly, there are so many seniors who will be in this position. That's who we're talking about here. These are some of the millions of people that will lose their access to health care if we don't extend the ACA. So I urge support for this. As Leader Schumer said, we can reopen the government today if we can simply extend the tax credits for another year and give us time through a bipartisan commission to work on a more permanent extension. I urge support, and Mr. President, I yield back.
Senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I thank my colleagues for this unified support for a measure that is eminently reasonable. I thank the leader of our side, Senator Schumer, for advancing this proposal. It is a compromise. It's simple and plain, and I'll be very blunt, it's not everything I would have wanted. Like the senator from Wisconsin, my friend Senator Baldwin, I would have wanted the health care tax credits to be permanently guaranteed. I would have wanted a guarantee as well that there be no rescissions or impoundments of funds, as this president has done repeatedly. I would have wanted a reversal of the firings, the so-called RIFs, reductions in forces, that have been eminently unfair, and a guarantee of back pay to everybody who has been furloughed. There are other provisions that, for me, were profoundly important. It is a compromise, and compromise is not a four-letter word. It is the way we get things done. And this picture of unity is worth 1,000 of my words, but it is also a clear response to a crisis that we face. And we face it today. It is a crisis in healthcare. It's a crisis in hunger. It's a crisis in air transportation. And for millions of Americans, it's a crisis of affordability. Nobody in America needed Tuesday's election to tell them that the costs of rent and electricity and food and all the other necessities in life are spiraling out of control. And yes, healthcare costs are spiraling out of control. And they are at the kitchen table right now across America, looking at the exchanges and concluding they simply can't afford those spiking premiums, multiples of 3 and 4 times, and at least twice what they were paying. And many of them are taking the risk that they will go without insurance. This measure guarantees an outcome. The majority leader, Senator Thune, has said he can't guarantee an outcome. All he can promise is a process. And I am unwilling to accept a promise of some vote at an indefinite point on an undefined bill sometime in the future, because the urgency of now for American families means they are making choices about whether they can afford insurance this moment for next year. And in fairness to the majority leader, he can't promise anything for either the Speaker of the House or the President. And they have been absent without leave. They have been AWOL. They have refused to talk. And we are presenting them now with a reasonable compromise that the majority leader can accept and our colleagues on the other side of the aisle should embrace. And the problem here is one of trust. What we've seen from the administration is a strategy of maximum pain to magnify political pressure. In just minutes from now, in the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, this administration will argue that SNAP benefits should be ended after the president himself promised that they would be paid in full in compliance with the district court orders in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. There's no way to trust that SNAP benefits will be provided without a guarantee from the courts. The urgency that we face is also in air transportation. We all want people to be able to reach their destinations safely. It has to come first. And We need to make sure that the TSA and air controllers are paid. They are heroes for having worked for so long without pay. We need to stop the madness of this trend line. It's a through line in the administration's tactics here. It's a through line of cruelty and stupidity that has magnified the costs for the American people, not just in blue states, but all across the country. And we should seek reform and improvement in the ACA, eliminating any kind of fraud and stopping the spiraling increase in health care costs. But I should warn my colleagues, we will not sacrifice the ACA. Very revealing yesterday in the hearing of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation was the commentary from a number of my Republican colleagues, in effect saying that we should kill the ACA, an effort that has been part of their relentless campaign over the last 15 years to decimate this resounding and important law that now is embraced by the vast majority of the American people. And we put in the record stories of individuals from Michigan and Pennsylvania and Iowa, Aaron Lehman, a fifth-generation farmer who told us, "I grow corn, soybeans, oats, and hay with my family. The Affordable Care Act has been one of the best investments in rural health care in decades." We cannot afford as a nation to go back to the days when pre-existing conditions were a pretext for denying health care if someone had a history of cancer, diabetes, heart disease, HIV, asthma, depression, pregnancy. The list goes on. Insurers could force patients to pay more or refuse to offer them coverage at all. Standing strong for the ACA very simply means providing health care to Americans. Extending the health care tax credits for 1 year is a compromise that makes sense. It will put the government back to work fully and capably and fairly, and I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this reasonable compromise. I yield the floor.
Mr. President, I stand here today on behalf of the people of Massachusetts to say that we are angry. We are angry that Trump and MAGA Republicans are doubling the cost for millions of Americans, and their health care bills are going to skyrocket when they promised lower prices. We are angry that Trump and MAGA Republicans are stripping Medicaid from the most vulnerable people in our communities. We are angry that Trump and the MAGA Republicans are making families with hungry children go to food pantries for their next meal, forcing families to choose between groceries and rent. We are angry that Trump and MAGA Republicans are using public servants as pawns in their hateful political games. And we are angry that during all of this, the Republicans have refused to come to the negotiating table. The House of Representatives has been out for 6 weeks. They're in a political witness protection program across our nation, refusing to come to Washington to sit down to negotiate on these issues. And Americans are counting the hours that are left to solve this health care crisis for them and their families. They're looking around for help. They're looking around for hope. And they are all looking instead at cruelty, pain, fear. That is the agenda of Trump's MAGA Republican Party. Last weekend, I met with Jeff from Natick, who is fighting stage 4 lung cancer. He pays $35,000 a year for an affordable care, health care plan. $35,000 a year. If he can't keep that insurance plan on December 31st, he will have to pay $300,000 a year. Jeff does not have $300,000. That's about to hit him in about 7 weeks. Barbara, she retired early to take care of her spouse with dementia. Her bill's going from $7,500 a year to $18,000 a year. She cannot afford that. There are 22 million stories like Jeff, like Barbara, 22 million of them, who are facing Thanksgiving and Christmas over the next 7 weeks, and there are no answers for them. 22 million people. That's outrageous. These people are afraid and they're angry. By the way, we saw a lot of that anger come out on Tuesday night. They came out angry. They came out of fear to vote. That's what happened. And it's only going to build and build and build as each day goes by, and we cannot get an answer from the Republicans on how are we going to handle those people? How are we going to give them what they need for those families? And it is very difficult to fathom this abject cruelty of this president, who is happy to force grandma to choose between paying for her prescription and paying for her heating bill, forcing a caretaker to choose between being there for their parent with Alzheimer's or picking up an extra shift, forcing a single mom to choose between paying for a checkup or paying for after-school snacks. And since they have taken over in January, the Republicans have promised that they were going to solve the health care crisis in our country. And all it's done is grow and grow and grow. And they pass a bill to take away all of the health care coverage for all of these 22 million people and then transferred the money to billionaires in tax breaks. They swiped the health care of 22 million vulnerable people for billionaires. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the great Massachusetts poet, said, "Health is the first wealth." And MAGA Republicans and Trump have looted that wealth, that health, for those people. These people are angry and they're afraid. They're afraid. They don't have the backup funding that millionaires and billionaires have. Now, my father drove a truck for the Hood Milk Company. He drove a truck for the Hood Milk Company. I'm his son. And I believe that God created a world where every single person is able to receive the health care which they are entitled to. 3 meals a day, put children through school, keep them safe from illness, give Americans dignity in tough times. Those are the families we're talking to right now. It's the milkmen, it's the workers in nursing homes, it's the children across our country who are going to see a loved one lose their health care in 7 weeks. And the Republicans refuse to come to the table. Every American has a right to live in dignity in tough times. That's where we are right now. They're facing increases in electricity costs, in healthcare costs, in food costs, in clothing costs, in everything. And we can solve at least the healthcare part of this issue right here. The richest nation in the world can ensure peace and health and opportunity for every man and woman and child in our country. We're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. And the Republicans are about to let 22 million of them lose their health insurance or see it increase by double or triple, or in the case of Eric from Natick, 10 times from $30,000 a year to $300,000 a year, and he is in stage 4 lung cancer? And we're not even discussing this? The House of Representatives is at a vacation for 6 weeks? Well, those 6 weeks, if you project them forward from now, we're talking about Christmas. That's what we're talking about. What are we in the world is in the mind of Donald Trump that he would allow these families for the next 6 weeks to worry about where the coverage for their family is going to come from? The very least we can do is extend the Affordable Care Tax credits for 1 more year and provide some desperately needed relief for those who are struggling to get by, who need our help right now, who need the peace of mind right now. Those 220 Republicans on that political witness protection program that they're on across the country, they're going to have health insurance for their families. They don't have to worry this Thanksgiving or Christmas about the conversation that's going to take place. And all we're asking for is a vote to provide that health care for the next year for those families and reopen the government so the federal workers can get paid and go back on the job. Pretty simple. And we're looking for any Republican anywhere to come and discuss it with us, negotiate it with us. And they just keep saying no. So this anger that people are feeling, these people are pissed off at the federal government, pissed off that they're losing coverage for their family members. And they want the Republicans to come to the table and solve this problem. What we saw on Tuesday night was the beginning of this anger being translated into action. They asked the ancient Greek philosopher once, when would we know true justice? And he answered, we will know true justice when those who have not been harmed are as angry as those who have been harmed. And across our country right now, those who have not been harmed are angry on behalf of those who are about to be harmed. 22 million people losing their health insurance, seeing skyrocketing health insurance rates. Families, 42 million of them without food stamps, without SNAP programs for nutrition for their families. People are angry, and they deserve an answer. And all we're asking for is 1 year so that we can negotiate this issue. 1 year so we can give peace of mind to 22 million families that they know they will have health insurance after this Thanksgiving and Christmas. I thank you, Mr. President. I yield back.
Senator from Oregon.
President, I support this proposal and would like Americans to know why. Since before Donald Trump was sworn in for a second term, Senate Democrats have known that this is a health care problem for millions of American families that cries out for fixing. Again and again, we asked our Republican colleagues to work with us, sit with us, and negotiate improvements in a black-letter law that makes Americans' health care better for American families. Again and again, we were turned down. So, on the Senate Finance Committee, everybody knew this day was coming long before Donald Trump took the oath of office. Now the crisis is here, and I'm here to say our door is still open. The Senate Finance Committee has a track record of getting bipartisan work done. Senator Crapo and I wrote a bill that transformed how pharmacy benefit managers work in Medicare. It passed the Finance Committee 26-0. Despite this track record, Republicans still refuse to sit down and even have a conversation about how to help these Americans afford their premiums. That's why we've all been out on the floor today. I'm in the fight for Bart and Carla from Eugene, Oregon. A few years away from Medicare, they've had long careers as a carpenter and a teacher. They worked hard. Now the rug is being pulled out from under them. They've been paying $400 a month in premiums. Without an extension of the credits, they're going to pay $2,200 a month. That's an increase they just can't handle. My Republican colleagues have provided a host of excuses about why they can't work with us, but the excuses don't hold water. For example, there have been allegations of fraud, the same straw man that they used to make the largest Medicaid cuts in history. Republicans pretend they're fighting fraud, but really they're just pushing up costs and kicking working people off their health insurance. And so, to again try to bring everybody together, we introduced legislation that would prevent bad actor brokers from enrolling or switching people into plans without their knowledge. That way we could slap fraudsters with criminal penalties when they harm consumers. On the Republican side, after all the talk, no co-sponsors. Finally, there's been an excuse that says this policy was created during COVID, and now that the pandemic has passed, the tax credits ought to lapse too. Doesn't make any sense to me. I don't see Republicans coming down to the floor, for example, to say that telehealth benefits for seniors on Medicare should expire because they were created during the pandemic. This is something I feel strongly about. As my friend from Minnesota knows, I wrote that with the late Orrin Hatch on a bipartisan basis again. The first Trump administration used them to great success. Just because a good health care policy was created in a crisis moment doesn't mean it ought to be ripped away from Americans once the crisis is passed, especially when ending that policy would create a new crisis for over 20 million people who no longer will be able to afford good quality health care. Those are just a couple of the Republican excuses. But the bottom line is, over here, we want to protect families' health care and keep premiums from rocketing into the stratosphere. And unfortunately, the Republicans haven't shared that view. My hope is, and we've had an important conversation, appreciate the leadership, Senator Klobuchar, we've had an important conversation about trying to get our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to do the right thing. Join us as we've done so often in the Senate Finance Committee, and lower Americans' health care costs. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Georgia.
I believe in health care. Your health, my mother told me a long time ago, is everything, so take care of your health. It is vital. It is essential. And I believe that health care is a human right. And it is certainly something that the wealthiest nation on the planet and in the history of humankind can and ought to provide for all of its citizens. It is right, it is fair, but it is also smart. A healthy nation is a strong nation. Healthy children are ready to learn. And so that's why I've worked so hard and so long with my colleagues on this issue. Matter of fact, long before I came to the Senate, I've been focused on this issue of health care, trying to get my home state of Georgia to expand, and I keep preaching that sermon because right now there are more than 500,000 Georgians who are in the health care coverage gap. I came here in 2017 to this place not as a senator but as a pastor and as an activist. And I remember getting arrested, I believe in 2017, when there were major health care cuts on the table. And as I began to make my argument and gathered with other pastors in the rotunda, the Capitol Police, very professionally, but they began to say to us, pastors, you can't gather and pray in the rotunda, we'll have to arrest you.
What they didn't understand is that I had already been arrested. My mind and my imagination had been arrested by this idea that surely the American nation can do better than this. Healthcare is a human right. Dr. King, who led the church that I am still honored to lead, said that of all the injustices, inequality in healthcare is the most shocking and the most inhumane. And that's why I was proud to join my colleagues, and I am proud to stand with my colleagues in this fight. This is about 22 million Americans who will see their health care premiums double, some triple, some quadruple. And this is not theoretical stuff for me. These are the people in my community. These are folks sitting in the pews of my church. And many of them will lose their health care if something doesn't happen. A few weeks ago, I was at the Evans County Memorial Hospital in Evans County. And I got to tell you, that's a red district. I don't have a whole lot of votes. I got some. Claxton, Georgia, known for the fruitcakes. And I was at that hospital, and I can tell you that those folks were already worried because of the draconian cuts to Medicaid in the big, beautiful bill, so-called beautiful bill. 15 million Americans already standing to lose their health care, and then the premiums raised for 22 million Americans while giving Elon Musk and people like him a tax cut? That's beyond the pale of partisanship. For me, that's not about Democrats and Republicans. You ask ordinary people on the street if they think that's fair. I can tell you that those folks in Evans County, many of whom who did not vote for me, but I am fighting for them because I am their senator too. They're worried about it. And so that's why we've been in this fight, and that's why we continue to stand to this very day. It's day 38. And we're holding vigil because of the pain of the people we represent. And there's a lot of pain to go around. 22 million whose premiums may go up, have gone up. They're seeing it on the portals right now. Federal workers who've been furloughed. The kids who like me, are in Head Start. We've got Head Start centers that are about to shutter because of the government shutdown. And let's be honest, the folks on SNAP were dragged into this fight. They were not a part of this. They were dragged into this fight. There are already legal provisions to make sure that they are cared for, and this administration right now is defying a court order to feed America's hungry people. With all of that pain, from the crisis in health care, from the ongoing government shutdown, we come to our sisters and our brothers on the other side and we extend the hand of compromise. Because it hasn't taken me long to learn that really that's the only way you get anything done in this body. I work all the time with colleagues with whom I disagree about 90% of the time. Because it's not about them and it's not about me, it's about the people we represent. And the founders were wise to organize our government in such a way that that's the only way to have sustainable change, is to do it on a bipartisan basis. And so my colleagues have taken their position, we've taken ours, and here we are at an impasse. But I represent a state that elected me and Donald Trump. And so they expect us to figure it out. Sometimes when I'm driving my car, I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, 9-year-old daughter, 6-year-old son. Sometimes they're in the back seat having a disagreement. He looked at me. She touched me. And then they say, Daddy, you know, they call on me. And here's what I say more often than not. Figure it out. The two of you on the back seat of the car, that's your sister, that's your brother. We're all in the same car. We're trying to get to the same destination. Figure it out. We're all in the same car tonight. Democrats and Republicans. There's a way in which the poor and the wealthy don't. There's a way in which they're all in the same car. COVID reminded us of that. Before we had a vaccine, if my neighbor had the virus, I too was in peril. That didn't make my neighbor my adversary. That means that I have a vested interest in making sure that my neighbor has coverage. And so here's the proposal: 1 year clean extension of the ACA subsidies. That's you know that's not what we want. You know, if we had it our way, we would make it permanent. That's not what we fought for 38 days for, a 1-year extension, but we're offering that after standing for 38 days. 1 year extension, and then let's sit down, and in the words of Scripture, let us reason together. Let us have a conversation. Let's reopen the government. Let's extend health care to folks who in real time are opening up the portal and they have sticker shock. And then let's sit down and figure it out, because if we're honest, the status quo is not working very well for anybody. Anybody who's just trying to defend the status quo has not been talking to ordinary people. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed, and we can do that, but we've got to reopen the government and give people a little bit of hope. Give those 22 million Americans hope. Give the 44 million Americans who need SNAP some hope. Give our federal workers some hope. There's an African proverb that says, when the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. It's the grassroots in Georgia and all across the nation right now who are suffering, because too often the politicians make the politics about the politicians rather than about the people. Let's center the people, and if we center the people, we will compromise, and we'll figure it out. In closing, Mr. President, nobody believes a Baptist preacher when he says in closing. I've worked with members of your party on a whole range of things. And at the risk of embarrassing him, Ted Cruz and I even work together every now and then. And I mention him because early in my tenure here, he and I worked on a little thing, just a little provision, to try to get a little bit closer to building out this interstate, I-14. That would run through Georgia all the way to Texas. Same road that runs through Texas runs through Georgia. And if we get that road built out, when it's time to get on that road, nobody asks you, are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? Nobody asks you about your religion or if you have a religious tradition at all. Nobody asks you. Some folks are going to church, some are going to the mosque, some are going to temples, some are going to the park, some are going to the beach, but they all get on the same road trying to get to wherever they're going. There is a road that runs through this American experience. There's a road that runs through our humanity that ought to connect all of us together, that ought to remind us that we all want our children to thrive and we all want our families to have a future. Let us make haste to that road and walk towards a brighter American future. I yield the floor.